ago, certainly before the French Revolution, if a crime had been perpetrated within a parish, then the priest would pronounce a monitoire in which he would say that anyone who knew of the offence should come forward and tell all on pain of the fires of hell. He'd do this in the middle of High Mass on a Sunday, and it was fully expected that if you did know, you would come forward, because he didn't want to be excommunicated from the church, not just in this life, but in the great hereafter. He would repeat this declaration 3 times, and if the person still did not come forward, a dreadful curse would be issued, that anyone responsible for this crime should be compelled for 7 days and 7 nights to wear the skin of the wolf, to become a werewolf. Here is what happens to such a man. He runs naked through the woods and through rivers and through streams and through bushes, catching whatever prey he can, be it animal or be it human, to survive. Every time he runs past a crossroads, he is whipped by an invisible hand, and they say that whip is wielded by none other than Satan himself. And then after 7 days, he comes back and he looks reasonably normal, except he's naked. And he's got cuts and bruises and whip marks across his back, so that people can identify him as the one who is Arvaru, the one who is the werewolf. Damned souls can also become werewolves, and priests have to be a bit careful here. When a damned soul is a werewolf, he cannot lie in his grave. He scratches at the coffin, he gnaws through the shroud with his teeth, and he lets out dreadful howls, and the sexton patrols the churchyard. And if he notices that the earth on the grave is as high as it was the day that the coffin was laid in there, if he hears that howling and scratching, and if he sees a little sulphurous flame rising from the head of the grave, he rushes to tell the priest. And the old priest would grab a shovel, and he'd come down, and he would dig through the soil, and if the coffin was not broken, he would use the shovel to break open the coffin, and then he would use the shovel to sever the head of the werewolf. He would pick it up. He would fill its mouth with garlic and parsley and ashes made from burned palm leaves. And he would swing the head around, and he would throw it into the river, where it would drift down into a great abyss, and further and further and further down, until it reached the hell it should never have left in the first place. And there is only one way to kill a werewolf, and that is with silver bullets. Bullets that are made of church silver, consecrated silver. Those bullets must be blessed by a priest, and you've got to get it right, because you only get one chance. And when the werewolf is killed, he restores his human form. Apart from the fact his eyes are bigger, his nails are longer, his teeth are pronounced, and he has a bit more body hair than he did. Sometimes the priest will find out that someone is a werewolf in the confessional, and that's a really good idea, because the priest cannot break the inviolability of the confessional. A man might come in, he might say, "Bless me, Father, for I am a werewolf." And the priest will stay calm, and the priest will nod. And the priest will say, "And when were you bitten by a wolf?" And the man might say, "Father, I have no recollection of being bitten by a wolf before." And the priest will say, "Well, that is strange. For there are only 2 ways that a man can become a werewolf. One is to be bitten by a wolf, and the other is to know and have relations with a wolf." And then the man will go quiet, and he will say, "Actually, I do remember being bitten by a wolf." There was once a lord called Bisclavret, and he was beloved of his king. It's good, it's not that bloody. You know, I'm decent people tonight. He was beloved of his king, he was beloved of his people, he was beloved of his servants, and most of all, he was beloved of his wife, who could not have asked for a better husband, except that for 7 days every month he'd disappear. And she'd wonder where he'd gone. And then he would come back looking tired, and she wondered if he was being unfaithful to her. So she asked him. She said, "My dear husband, I love you so much, and I have no secrets from you. Have none from me." She said, "Where do you go on these 7 days?" He said, "My wife," he said, "I'm a werewolf." She went, "Okay." So, what do you do? He said, "Well, I run about the woods and I run about the trees and I catch what prey I can to eat, and then after 7 days I'm restored and I'm back to you." What do you wear when you're doing this? He said. He said, "I am completely naked. And fur grows and covers my body." She said, "Well, what do you do with your clothes?" He said, "I hide them." She said, "Where do you hide them?" He said, "I can't tell you that." He said, "Because if I tell you that and you find out where they are and you move them," "I won't move them." "I know you won't, but what if you accidentally tell someone? And I cannot return to human form and I'm cursed to live as a werewolf." She said, "Trust me, I'm your wife." He said, "Go in the cemetery, 3rd lane on the right, 2nd grave. There's a stone behind the 2nd grave. I lift it up, I put my clothes there, I come back home." And then he left her. And she was happy because he'd been so honest with her. And then she wasn't so happy because he was a bloody werewolf. And she wondered what she could do about this. And she called a former suitor of hers who was another lord and had never got over the grief and had wanted her for many, many years. And she said, "If you do me a small service, then I am yours." He said, "Mine?" She said, "Yeah." He said, "All of you?" She said, "Every bit." She said, "You will go to the cemetery tonight. You will take the 3rd lane on the right. You will go to the 2nd grave. You will go behind the 2nd grave. You will lift up the stone. You will bring the clothes that you find there back to me." And he did. And at the end of his 7 days, Bisclavret came back to the grave. He lifted his stone, and the clothes went there, and Bisclavret howled. And the king sent his finest knights out to look for Bisclavret. They looked for 1 year, they looked for 2 years. And then they had to say that he must have perished on his journeys. And as for the widow Bisclavret, as she was now known, she married her faithful lord, and he had all of her, every bit. Rumours were going through the land of a strange beast that was prowling the forest of Brocelion. And the king and his troops were riding out there one night, and suddenly one of the servants came back and said, "Wolf! Beast! Wolf! Beast!" And the king thought, this is it, and they rode, and there in the corner was a mighty wolf creature on its back legs, and the hounds were going for it, and every time the hound went, the wolf was knocking it away and killing it, and the king rode up with his spear, and he went to take the beast himself. And then the wolf leapt straight for the king, knelt in front of him, and licked his boot. And the servants came with their arrows to fire. The king said, "No, this is a wise and true and loyal beast, and it shall come back to the castle with us, and it shall be mine." And the wolf led as if it knew the way to go, and it waited by the gate for it to be opened, and it became a loyal companion. And it was a wondrous beast, and the king invited all of his lords and ladies to see it. And the wolf would bow its head to the men, and it would lick the hands of the ladies, and everybody thought it was the most wonderful creature in all creation, until widow Bisclavret and her new husband came in, and they were introduced to the wolf creature, and the wolf creature leapt up, and it ripped off her nose, and blood gushed all over the floor. The husband turned to get his sword, and as he did, the wolf leapt, and it bit off one of his glutei maximi. Doesn't mean that. No, it's not. It's not that. It's buttocks. That's T, not L. All right. The king raised his sword to kill these beasts who had betrayed him and disgraced him, and suddenly the doors flew open. And in came an old man with long white hair and robes covered in stars and moons, and maybe it was Merlin himself. Peace to this house, and peace to that beast to whom a great wrong has been done. And he took a manuscript from his pocket. Merlin had great manuscripts which he could read, and they would tell him the future. They would tell him what would happen next. I have to hear. He would tell him what would happen next. And he took a handful of dust and he threw it into the fire and he read the flames. I have to do this because if I don't get my Arts Council money. And the flames glowed green. He said, this is not a wolf, this is a man, and a great wrong has been done to it by these people. And the king demanded they tell all that they knew. And the widow Bisclavret, as she was still known, told all that she knew. He said, where are the clothes, said the king. She said, they're in a cupboard in our castle. You will ride home, you will get them now. So she and her lord climbed aboard their horses. She rode back, her nose still bleeding. He rode back a little uncomfortably. Bit half-assed, to be honest. Sorry. And then they brought the clothes back and they gave them to the wolf. And the wolf took them to the king's chamber, and servants followed, and as he went in, he shut the door behind him because he didn't want anyone to see him changing. And then he put on the robes and he came down and he was restored as Bisclavret. And he looked no older than that day, years before, that he had walked from the kingdom and had been seen no more. And the king asked what they should do with this wretched couple. The king wanted to put them to death. But Bisclavret merely asked that they be banished, and they were sent to Rennes, which is the French bit of Brittany. And they did not like that at all. The family thrived. You can still see their descendants. You can still point. The women have small noses or no noses, and the men are a bit short in the old buttock department. And as for Bisclavret thrived. He did very, very, very well. And he stayed the king's companion, although he did like to eat his dinner on the floor. And he would only sit on the sofa if he was invited to.